What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? Dan and Grant are back with our final installation of NBA offseason grades, which can only mean that these will A, either be outdated before they go live, or B, be outdated immediately after they go live, because that would be absolutely how this works. But we're into the Pacific Division. Very quickly before we get started, please remember to subscribe to us wherever you consume us. I'm talking too fast again. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Likes and comments help us bust up that algorithm too. If this is your first time checking us out on your podcast player, subscribe to us there. Ratings on Spotify and Apple help a ton, or iTunes. What is it? It's Apple now. It's Apple Podcast, not iTunes. I'm so old. Apple, that helps us out a ton. Follow us on the socials. Those are on the screen or in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Join our Discord. Those are in the podcast and YouTube descriptions as well. And if you're just around because we're the only podcast that's putting out off-season content consistently, please consider sticking around when the season gets back up and the content will be even more saturated. We appreciate you checking us out now, but also consider staying with us long-term. With that out of the way, Grant, how the hell are you doing?
I'm good. I would just say that the audience really is going to owe it to us, right? Like we are it.
Great way to pick up listeners. We're doing you all a favor.
Yeah, you're welcome. First of all, I'm doing great. I'm excited to wrap this with the division that I pay the closest attention to, just by virtue of my. We don't have to hide our fandom, right? Everybody who's listened long enough knows I'm a Warriors fan. So yeah, I'm glad to do the Pacific.
It's funny because I do think you're in the same boat that I would argue at least a majority of our listeners don't know you're a Warriors fan. And there are like a majority of people, I'm sure a majority of this podcast knows I'm a Knicks fan, but like the way I talk about the Knicks or just cover the league, everyone accuses me of being biased against the Knicks. And so I'm like, that must mean I'm doing my job probably still poorly, but at least correctly if they can't detect it. Because it's just funny when I get accused of like, why do you hate the Knicks? And it's just like, if you had any sort of knowledge of like my background, it's just the complete opposite.
You hate them because they've hurt you so much, because you care so much. That's not hate.
Yeah, I've consumed too much of my life rooting for them, and hence my life is ruined. But criteria for these, as always, we don't care about Grant's fandom because he's just drowning in championship rings and dynastic aspirations at the moment. Mm-hmm. We are grading these teams to this point as of Monday, August 22nd, even though you're probably listening to this on Wednesday or Thursday of that same week. And also, these are organizational grades. So we're not grading them from the player's perspective. And finally, don't get mad when people get B's and C or C's here. Don't get mad if they get a B. If anyone was ever mad at a B in school, I fucking hate you. Like, I remember my mom being angry that I got like 88s. Like, if I didn't get like 89 and up, it was considered like a disappointment. Don't hold people to that standard. That's unfair. A C is passing. A C minus is passing. So that's how we're doing this. It's the D's and the F's you really have to worry about. And there are certainly questions when you get into the C territory. With the criteria out of the way, though, Grant, and I'll throw it up on the screen for the YouTube watchers, we begin with the Golden State Warriors, and their notable moves include drafting Patrick Baldwin Jr. at number 28. They signed Lester Quinones to a two-way contract. They acquired Ryan Rollins, number 44, from the Hawks for Tyrese Martin, number 51, and $2 million in cash. They signed Hollins then to a 3-year, $4.8 million deal. His first 2 years are guaranteed. They re-signed Kevon Looney to a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. $17.5 million is guaranteed. The final season, when he'll be 28, is his age 21 campaign anyway. There's only $3 million guaranteed. It fully guarantees if the team wins the title in 2023 or 2024. They signed JaMychal Green to a 1-year vet minimum deal after the Thunder bought him out. They signed Dante DiVincenzo to a 2-year, $9.2 million deal. Most of the mini MLE there. There's a player option on year 2. They signed Mac McClung to an Exhibit 9 contract. They signed Trevion Williams to an Exhibit 10 deal. Notable exits. Gary Payton II signed with the Blazers. Otto Porter Jr. signed with the Raptors. Damian Lee signed with the Suns. Juan Toscano Anderson is projected to be part of the Los Angeles Lakers' best closing lineup this season. And Andre Iguodala and Quindary Weatherspoon remain unsigned. What grade did you give your Warriors, Grant? And did we miss any of the transactions? This is the team that you can't afford to have anything missing.
Yeah, they didn't do a whole lot. So yeah, no, you got it.
Is a big deal.
Mac McClung dribbling the air out of the ball and searching for highlight passes in summer league was not one of my favorite things. This is a B for me. And the Warriors are kind of weirdly a hard team to evaluate because on one side you have well, how do they, why didn't they just pay whatever it costs to keep Porter and Payton? And there's some validity to that, because why do we care what the billionaire spends? At the same time, like, my personal opinion is like, you got to miss me with that stuff, like, or at least start somewhere else, because there are much richer owners that are way tighter with their spending. So just start somewhere else when you're going to complain about, like, why. Now, not all of them are title or defending a title or trying to get another one, but like, there's a little lower hanging fruit if you're going to complain about ownership frugality. Like, this is not the place to start with that, in my opinion. So it sucks to lose Peyton. Super important, played a key role, was better than he's ever been in his career, is not that young. Sucks to lose Porter, also played a key role, was better than he's been in a couple years. Perfect situation factored in for both of them. I would love to have had both back from a fan perspective, but I think to kind of backfill with Dante DiVincenzo, I mean, on a to me, a bargain deal, and to get JaMychal Green kind of into the Porter spot, I think based on how hard it typically is to keep a championship team together and not suffer a bunch of attrition, which the Warriors did. I mean, you listed all the guys they lost. Most of them were not significant minute players, but like, they did lose Peyton and Porter. It's hard to keep a team this good together, especially on the margins where guys are going to go somewhere else and get more money or get bigger roles. So I think all that factored in, the B feels right to me. And that's not even like really like looking at the Looney retention, which I think is super important. And I do like the Baldwin pick, because this is sort of like, when they got him, it felt like, I'm not making this comparison, but it's a sort of like a different version, a lesser version of a Michael Porter Jr. draft pick, because Baldwin was like a top 5, depending on where you look, top 10 in his high school class. So like, it was a weird situation where he went to a school that wasn't a big deal. His father was a coach. But similar in that, like, well, it's really just injuries for him. He had a terrible collegiate season. It was short and it was injury ridden, but like, he's a big guy that can shoot. And there was at a point, like, this guy is one of the 5 or 10 best players of his age in the country. So getting someone like that at 28, when you're the Warriors and you can just afford to take home run swings with, major downside, I really think that was the right pick for them. And the other thing that you have to sort of, for me, consider here is they're just banking on a ton of organic growth, which isn't an off-season thing. I mean, like, unless we're going to start factoring in, like, what's the player development staff doing? But I think in light of the expectation that guys like Moody and guys like Kuminga specifically, and even Poole, are going to improve, I think it makes sense to go for someone like DiVincenzo, who, like, injuries are the issue for him. So there's a chance that he only gives you 40 good games or something like that. But that's okay, because you're going to backfill that with guys that are young and already on the roster and getting better. So even the downside risk of DiVincenzo, which is for sure there, because he didn't look like an NBA player or a good NBA player for a lot of the last year, 2 years. I think that makes sense. So it's still just a B, because they did lose key guys, but I think they did about as well as they could, without just deciding to have like a $600 million, roster cost.
Yeah, I gave them a B too, and I tend to lean towards they should have just kept, and I would have picked GP2 over Otto Porter Jr. because of the Kuminga stuff. And I think they did with picking up JaMychal Green. I think what they basically done this offseason, they've showed less faith in James Wiseman than they did in Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, based off how their offseason went. And that makes sense, but they also didn't go the full route of, we're going to sign Hassan Whiteside, because that would have showed like no faith in James Wiseman probably. So I like the JaMychal Green pickup. And the thing with Otto Porter Jr., he wanted to be in Toronto, and I firmly believe he took less than market value, and that his actual salary, like, the Warriors wouldn't have been able. Like, he probably had richer offers from than the Raptors, and the Warriors wouldn't have been able to pay him that much. So, and then the DiVincenzo pickup, like, sort of mitigates losing GP2. But again, on a team that really doesn't have, like, it's Moses Moody and Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson as your wings. And so now you're depending a lot on, I think Moses Moody might be ready based off what little we saw from him last season. Now you're kind of like, well, Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins are both just going to be really good, and that's that. Offensively, Klay Thompson, sure. Having now games under his belt, maybe he continues to improve defensively. I'm just not like, Andrew Wiggins was just the second best player on their team during the finals. Like, that makes me wildly uncomfortable. and very appreciative of Steph for that matter. And that's like where I'm sort of like, they couldn't have won something else where like, if you have GP2, yeah, he's smaller, but at least that kind of beefs up your wing defense in the event of disaster. If Moody's not ready, if Wiggins regresses, if Klay Thompson gets injured. I know he's smaller, but he can defend bigger. The Kevon Looney signing, though, was a steal.
Yeah.
A steal. You have JaVale McGee getting about as much guaranteed money as Kevon Looney. Explain that to me. Yeah. Explain it. You can't do it. It's inexplicable. And so, yeah, I do think they should have paid one of them, but I can't quibble over it. And the way you frame the Patrick Baldwin Jr. pick almost made me want to bump them up higher. But I still think they should have kept somebody and like between GP2 but like they should have kept GP2 because they could have given him that money. Otto Porter Jr. was more of just sort of like that was just iffy territory there. And the other thing is just like, I guess he had the leverage because he was signing for less than the mini MLE, so it's a win. But now they can't even keep Dante DiVincenzo if he's good because he's not going to stay because he has the player option and he's not going to play stay for the mini MLE, which would be the most that they could offer him effectively. So it's not a loss, but it's just like, I guess he had the leverage for a player option, especially because they didn't give him the full mini MLE. I think it was a good offseason, and you had to bank on organic growth if you want to keep Klay Thompson and Draymond Green long-term with the rest of this core. I do wonder if the absence of extensions for anyone, the offseason is not over yet. Does that matter to you at all at this point?
I mean, I don't know how it certainly has the potential to change the grade, right? Like, because if they if they managed to reach an agreement with Poole, just to take one of them, and you're talking like Anthony Simons money or less, then I probably bump it up.
Right.
If if it's significantly more than that, then maybe we're not changing it. And who knows what happens with Wiggins, what happens with Green, like. It just there is a little bit of an incomplete element here, but I really don't know. It really would just come down to how good these extensions are. Like, just if they extend or do not, if they don't do anything, I can't really knock it because they just retain all the leverage anyway, and nothing really changes. And I don't think this is a team where it's like, well, Jordan Poole's pissed off and he's not going to, you can't, like, this is a championship contender. That's not going to fly in the locker room. So the downside risk of not giving guys as much as you can right away is not as severe here as it would be on another team. It
would be, and I don't have a feel for what they should extend to any of these four guys. I don't like Klay Thompson. I'm not worried about because it's just like Klay's not going to go anywhere if they want to keep him. And Draymond Green is like, I feel like they shouldn't extend him and they should make him opt out and play the market. But I could also, like, if they do extend him, my guess would be that I'm going to be surprised at how cheap it was because I don't know why the Warriors would do it. I'm not saying he's not important, but just like, that's where I'm at with him. I have no feel for Jordan Poole. I think Anthony Simons' money feels about right. But to me, he's shown he can do more when you look at his finishing specifically than Anthony Simons on offense. But like Anthony Simons has done it in like a higher leverage role because of the amount of time he was playing without Dame or even CJ last year.
Yeah. But to go the other way, like Poole has performed really well against the best teams in the biggest games, and Simons did it down the stretch for a team that was tanking. I don't disagree with you. Like,
no, you're right. You're right.
We've seen Simons do it, but I think we've seen Poole do it too. I don't know. I don't know, like, if I'm comfortable with Poole as like Curry's successor, right? Like, this is the guy who gets the keys in 5 years or whatever it is. God, I hope it's 5 years, 5 more years for Steph.
I hope it's like 12.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as long as you're willing to give me. But I think in his role right now, Poole is like just an absolute luxury. He is overqualified for, like, by a ridiculous degree for what like his actual responsibilities are on the team right now.
Yeah, and so my overall point was I don't think I could get mad. I guess the player's extension I'd most likely be turned off by, which is weird, might be Wiggins's depending on what it is. I do think it would be awkward though. Like, wasn't there that video of Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins congratulating each other on getting the bag this offseason, and they just extend neither of them? That'd be like,
I forgive everything said within an hour of winning a championship. you're not in your right mind. That'll never hold up in court. Like, they cannot be held to those statements.
Yeah, B's across the board. And I think they only really have I can't imagine them going down. Like, it would have to be, they'd have to max out Poole and declare him Curry's successor for me to be like, whoa, we need to
or just give Draymond like the full max or something totally insane, crazy like that.
Yeah. So B's across the board for them. We are on to, and I need to put it up on the screen, but we're on to the LA Clippers, which I have a feeling where we're both going to go with this. They signed Ivica Zubac to a 3-year, $32.8 million extension. He declined, or they declined. I think he had a non-guarantee, whatever. There was the season that he had left in 2022, 2023, that option was declined as part of the extension. They signed Nicholas Batum to a 2-year, $22.6 million deal. That was not, incidentally, declared they were going to investigate salary cap circumvention like the Sixers and James Harden. They signed Amir Coffey to a 3-year, $11 million deal, fully guaranteed. They signed John Wall to a 2-year, $13.3 million deal. That was the MLE and includes a team option on the second year. They drafted Musa Diabata at number 43 and signed him to a 2-way contract. They signed Xavier Moon and Moses Brown to Exhibit 10 deals. Notable exits, they waived Jay Scrubb. Isaiah Hartenstein signed with the Knicks. I will note that the Knicks gave Hartenstein more than the Clippers could physically offer. They were limited to their mini MLE. And Rodney Hood remains unsigned. Rodney Hood just floating out there remaining unsigned is like kind of sort of interesting, maybe, perhaps not after what we've seen the past few years. Anyway, Grant, what grade do you give the Clippers and why is it just a flat A?
Well, I wanted to make it an A- because of, I don't know if I had to choose between Zubac and Hartenstein. I don't know what I do. I hate that they lost Hartenstein. We've lauded the Knicks for getting Hartenstein. It's still just a flat A. Because like you said, it was a financial thing, and like Zubac's contract is still like a total bargain to me. And I don't know how badly you need 2 conventional centers. So that's all fine. I just can't go less than an A because like getting the team option on Wall. There's like, I'm not saying it's likely, but there's a chance that Wall plays like a guy that, he's got 13.3 million total over the 2 years. There's a chance he plays like a guy who should be getting paid twice that this year. Like you don't know that he might really be that good. It's not likely.
The time he played in Houston, not this past season, obviously, but like after he was first rate, like he wasn't terrible. It was
good enough. Yeah. It was good, and with nothing around him. And now it's just like, look at the transformation of the roster that he's playing with. So, and the best thing is like, if it goes belly up, if he can't play at all, it's like, oh, well, we're off the hook for this next year. We spent $6.5 million or whatever it was, like not a big deal. And frankly, like they don't need him. Like they're going to be very good without him. So, your guy, Amir Coffey, totally reasonable deal, 3 for 11. Batum may feel a little bit rich, but I think he really matters on this team still. It's an A. I don't know unless like you had to have Hartenstein and you would have cost you all this other stuff to keep him.
But you couldn't. Like he signed for more than he would have had to take less to stay.
Right.
So unless you're going to tell me he was going to take less and you wanted him over John, this is my only A+ of the offseason because look, they hit everything. Like you got Nick Batum back. They just have Amir Coffey was really good last year. I couldn't believe they only got him for $11 million over 3. I was actively angry at basically every other single team in the NBA for allowing that to happen. The Zubac extension for a starting 5. Yeah. That's a number that it's not even, it's okay that you're paying him that, even though he might not close some games. You bump that up like $5 to $8 million a year and you would still be okay with that. He is a better rim protector than he gets credit for, has real value for what he does on the offensive end for them. I think you could dig them if you wanted to be like, well, the backup big situation is kind of weird. It's Zubac and Moses Brown. And then, is Rocco or Morris there? Primary like backup 5. Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
I'm fine with that. That sounds great.
Because you know what? Reggie Jackson and John Wall, there are flaws with either player where if John Wall is not John Wall, then you don't have a primary like playmaker on this team. Like you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but you don't have like the floor general type pass first guy. But then you get to go point guard list because of all like your smaller ball options. And the other thing that's probably just not receiving enough attention to me, and you meant, by the way, the team option for John Wall is a home run for the Clippers. They have not been looped in to the Kevin Durant trade talks at all. There's been they've like with the Celtics and Jaylen Brown, whether they let it out, whether the Nets let it out, whether that's completely false. And let's face it, it's not. There has to be a modicum of truth to it. There's been nothing. Paul George is on the table for Kevin Durant. They didn't even get what we just saw from Shams recently. Both the Nuggets and the Pelicans inquired about Kevin Durant. Like they've just steered clear of all of that. And you can argue, well, there's still the combustibility with the injuries to Powell and Kawhi and Paul George. Like, okay, what do you want them to do about that? They can't physically pay for a magic wand that just rids Kawhi Leonard and Paul George of all these injuries. They had nothing to work with this offseason aside from talent retention in the mini MLE, and they turned that talent retention into a steal of a deal for Amir Coffey. I would say like market value for Nick Batum, the way he's played over the past 2 seasons, maybe there's some risk there at that number, but the cap is going up. And then just like John Wall with a team option for the mini MLE. This was an A plus. I don't know how they could have had a better offseason. Again, unless you told me Hartenstein said, hey, I'll come back for less than the MLE. But then at that point, I'm like, oh, well, then who are you signing to maybe be? Like the ceiling on John Wall is higher than the ceiling on Hartenstein still.
No doubt.
So that, like, I can't even really fault that. So it's an A plus, and it's the only one I gave out this summer.
Yeah, I don't give A pluses, but this would have been right in. I mean, I don't know whose offseason is just a cleaner like string of wins than this one.
Mr. I don't give out A pluses. You're one of those. All right. I like to save one, and I try to give one F. I don't think I gave out an F this offseason though.
Well, the Lakers are next.
Speaking of which, the Lakers are up. Notable moves. Russell Westbrook picked up his $47.1 million player option. Stanley Johnson picked up his player option. Kendrick Nunn picked up his player option. Wenyen Gabriel's contract was guaranteed, I believe. LeBron James signed a 2-year, $97.1 million extension. Player option on year 2, which is 2024, 2025. Of note, that money goes up if the cap goes up. Signed Lonnie Walker IV to a 1-year deal at the mini MLE. Signed Troy Brown Jr. to a vet minimum deal. Signed Damian Jones to a 2-year, $4.9 million deal with a player option on year 2. Signed Juan Toscano Anderson, a favorite of Hardwood Knocks, to a 1-year vet minimum. Signed Thomas Bryant to a 1-year vet minimum. Drafted Max Christie at number 35 and signed him to a 2-year, $2.7 million deal. Signed Cole Swider to a 2-way contract. Signed Scottie Pippen Jr. to a 2-way contract. And gave Exhibit 10s to Javante McCoy, Jay Huff, and Fabian White Jr. Their notable exits include Malik Monk signing with the Kings. Kent Bazemore also signed with the Kings. Dwight Howard, Melo, DJ Augustine, Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington, and Avery Bradley remained unsigned. I'm just laughing at how many guys were actually playing for the Lakers last year who just remain unsigned right now. Maybe that's not actually funny. But Grant, what move did you give the Lakers? And I would like you to maybe answer this question first before you give the grade. Did you price in at all that Russell Westbrook at this moment is still on the team?
I mean, yeah, that's a factor. So I think I had this as a C- in July, and I've since gone down to a D+, not for any particular reason, but just looking at what the team projects to be. I'm just decreasingly enthused, I guess would be the right way to say that. Yeah, Westbrook still being there is not a great look. I just, but again, like how much, this is ultimately, we should be penalizing them for having him on the roster in the first place. That's been belabored forever. It's just, he's hard to trade and he should be hard to trade. So it's a factor and it's not helpful, but it's not like the end all be all. The main thing is like, I don't think this team is better. I think probably looking at it now, it's worse. Even if you're just going the downgrade from Monk to Lonnie Walker, and like you could defend the Lonnie Walker move, like he's young enough that he's had flashes of he's shot it great from 3 in one season, and
he was good after the trade deadline last year too.
So something is there, and I guess if you're gonna take flyers on guys because that's sort of all you can afford to do. Decent option. So I mean, it's still a D+. Like I didn't fail him, but like there's just no shooting on this team. There's just not nearly enough supporting talent. And like the really bad thing is when you listed those guys that are unsigned, some of them started to like, man, I think, well, geez, Ariza and Ellington, like I think I might want those guys on the roster. And here's the thing, nobody else does. Like they're unsigned. So the fact that looking at the like discarded Lakers from last year makes me think like those guys could actually help. That tells me that the roster going in is not great. Now we love Toscano Anderson, totally agree there. But like he's not a shooter, certainly not at volume. He's going to be helpful in some aspects. He's a great passer. He can play a lot of positions. He had, I think, one of the highest defensive versatility numbers on B-ball index from last year. He can guard everybody, but he's like, I mean, you saw it last year on a really good team. He's not going to play. So that just tells you where the Lakers are. So it's a D+. It could be lower if you really wanted to just kill him for, not addressing the shooting. But you know, it's not a good grade. It's spoiler. It's the worst in the division for me by a considerable margin.
I gave them a D+ and tried not to bake in Russell Westbrook as much. Otherwise, I would have given them an F. Because the reality is just like we can say give up the 2 picks for Kyrie Irving. We don't actually know if the Nets would do that. That's just the
I think
assumption.
we know they wouldn't, because if that were on the table, don't you think that's done? Don't like it has to be done.
If the Nets said, "Hey, give us Russ and 2 picks," you mean? Yeah, for sure. And I'll ask you about the Russ stuff in a second and see whether that could technically elevate their grade. It does, I think. Let's get to that in a minute. I was happy about the Lonnie Walker signing until I saw like, oh, they didn't even get a player option, like a team option, excuse me, on that, or a non-guarantee. That was bad. And I know they're trying to conserve their powder, but then did you really have to give him the full MLE? What was his market? He was a restricted free agent, but like if Amir Coffey was 3 year, $11 million, like Amir Coffey has shown more to me, like to trust to be part of a team, like to be part of a larger ecosystem than Lonnie Walker the fourth. So I did not love that. And like you said, they failed to address the shooting. They could not, and I'm not digging them for losing Malik Monk. They couldn't keep Malik Monk. That's also why when you're picking up distressed players as a team, I get why the players roll the dice. As a team, get a team option. Like, and I do think Lonnie Walker the fourth, probably a situation where he could have had a team option. And why Damian Lee player option? Like, is this a for real thing right now? Or Damian Jones, I'm sorry. He showed a lot with the Kings last year. Some like from what I saw, and I didn't see a ton of him, but like had some really nice offensive moments with them. Why does he have a player option? Why?
Yeah. Why is he better than some random minimum guy you could go get?
I love the JTA signing, and I think that's why I said it at the top of this segment. I think that he should be part of their closing lineup, which is also kind of harrowing when you really think about it. I thought the Max Christie pick and then subsequent contract was a good one for them, but to just not have more shooting around LeBron where it's, who is, and please don't include LeBron James in this. I guess it's Kendrick Nunn, but who's the best shooter on this team?
I mean, if I can't include LeBron, it's none, I think. In terms of guys that can actually get up enough shots for it to like actually matter. Because there's a scenario where JTA takes like 0.7 threes a game and shoots 38% or something like that.
Yeah.
But
so
that just doesn't matter.
And just like I saw like people on Lakers Twitter talking about Troy Brown Jr. as like a 3-and-D, like almost wingish type player. I'm going to let you know right now, that is not what he's even hinted at being in the NBA. He's actually been better defensively than I could have expected. The 3 ball has not been something that I've just been like trusting. He can maybe do stuff off the dribble, but hey, so can Russ and LeBron and Kendrick Nunn and Lonnie Walker the fourth now. Yeah. I like the Thomas Bryant signing. Like, is he the best shooter on this team?
That's a good point. I mean, he has been.
With the exception of last year,
he has the potential to be one of the more meaningful shooters. Yeah.
So I might even bump this up to a C- because there were some like stabs in the dark they took, but there was nothing done that inspired confidence in me yet. And you know what? I'm going to give them, because they got the LeBron extension. I need to bump this up to a C. Or C. I'm going to go C-, just because the LeBron extension, I think, provides a level of clarity that matters. So now, are you a little bit, if they're more comfortable trading their picks because LeBron's here for a guaranteed 2 years instead of 1, sure, why not? And so, like, what else, really, who are they going to sign for Bruce Brown Jr. would have made way more sense here. Was he willing to go to the Lakers, who apparently didn't want to give out, like, player options to good players, like, or something? Like, so I'll go C-, but, and I'll throw this to you here, the Russell Westbrook, if they move him, has the potential to shoot that grade way up. We would be in agreement. And would you do, so the Kyrie one is, if it's Russ, the 2 firsts for Kyrie, are you doing it? I'd like to throw other scenarios at you to see if you would do it.
So I think this is so hard because like, I'm so out on Kyrie Irving as a player I want on my team, but this is like the circumstance where it would check out logically to me. So yeah, if they go Russ in the 27 and 29, right? Those are the first, and they get Kyrie and I don't know what that goes to. I'm probably going to like the B range just because who cares? Like this, if all you have is your 27 and your 29, you're kind of already compromised in terms of like your pick equity. So like, and you're way down the road. You just extended LeBron. Like, I think getting Irving in there, so then Kyrie Irving's your best shooter, right? Like there's part of it.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. That's addressed. So if they did that, great. But like some of the other packages, I don't know. It's hard to say how I'd feel. It'd be a case by case thing, but just like the Russ thing's not going to work. It's so if they don't do it, if
What
they
are things we said immediately after the Russell Westbrook trade happened?
immediately and like
And
real loudly, it was very comfortable out on that limb. Like I did not have any doubt that that was going to flip on me.
And Lakers fans have started to push back, at least towards this podcast, by saying, well, the Lakers were the championship favorite after that trade. That has no bearing on reality. That's just based off of the action that was geared toward the Lakers championship odds.
It's because of how many people make that exact argument that the odds were what they were. It's like they're just trying to draw enough bets on either side of the line. Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. Yeah, well, so if say they do the Kyrie trade or something else, like how high are you going?
Probably B+, maybe an A-, because the LeBron extension, like right now, what I thought was interesting, Nate Duncan pointed this out. LeBron signed it like basically the day after it ensured he could not be traded next season, like because of the 6-month rule. And so like you could argue, well, now you have no flexibility because you can't trade LeBron when you don't have Kyrie, but all of a sudden that's not unpalatable. And you were never trading LeBron to begin with. Like, what is that? Like even getting into that discussion is just harrowing. So I'd probably give B+, A- range, because like, I'm still not inspired. Like, I guess I could go A- because I like Damian Jones, where if you're going to tell me that you don't want to prioritize cap space next year because you have Kyrie Irving, I don't care that Damian Jones has that player option. So I might go as high as A-. You alluded to these other deals. Let me throw a couple at you to see what you would do. Are you doing the 2 firsts and Russ for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner?
Yeah, I am. I think I am, because you're getting two like legitimate starting. I mean, Hield we can argue about, but 2 legitimate starters, and the shooting. Jesus Christ, the shooting would just change the team.
And I think people have argued that Miles Turner wouldn't be part of the Lakers' closing lineup. So why are you giving him 2 first-round picks? One, he has a better chance of being part of good closing lineups than Russ.
Yeah,
and just like Anthony Davis, there's 82 other games where he doesn't want to play center.
right.
And so like Miles Turner certainly matters. The Jazz scenarios that are being bandied about, what combination, if it's, let's say it's Bojan Bogdanovic, Malik Beasley, and Patrick Beverley for Russ, are you giving up 2 first-round picks for that? Those are all expiring contracts. Malik Beasley has a team option, but
that's harder. I mean, it's Beasley, Russ, or Beasley, Bogdanovic, and Beverly. I don't know if that's quite it. I'm trying to get away with Russ in one of the picks. I think I'm trying to hold on to one.
I think Bogdanovic might be worth a first-round pick on his own, like a lower level one.
Yeah.
I get this is into the future, but like Malik Beasley helps them out more. I think the 1 first-round pick stuff only starts to fly if Conley's deal has become such a net negative that teams have decided, oh, that $15 million partial guarantee in 23-24 is a problem. And my whole thing is that if I was the Lakers, I might still give up 2 first-round picks in that, because Mike Conley was good last year. People just have a sour taste in his mouth because of the postseason. So if it was Conley, Beasley, and Bogdanovic, I might still give up the 2 first. I think it's less inspiring than some of the other packages for what you're trying to project ahead long-term, but you already hit on it. Fuck long-term. You have LeBron right now, so I would do it. I'm trying to think of a scenario where you could give up 1 first-round pick and get better. And I think the scenario would be, and it'd be a negligible needle, but it's like Fournier and Randall for like Russ. Like, is that a deal you're doing? No picks involved, or even doing that if you're the Lakers?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really want Russ off this team so bad if I'm the Lakers. So, I mean, what about is the Gordon Hayward stuff? Like, there's just to have salary ballast there. Like, I don't know what you have to give up with Russ to.
Yeah, like what is Charlotte doing in that scenario? I don't want to
Charlotte ever doing.
I don't want to talk about the Miles Bridges thing in basketball terms, but like you're only then doing that if you're trying to rebuild, right? Because you want to get off long-term money. They have not acted like a team that's trying to do that. And so I don't know what and my point on Bridges was like, you kind of need Gordon Hayward now because obviously. So
well, you need him to do what? To try to finish 7th? Like,
but first of all, that's way too high of a ceiling. You need them to do what you've always been trying to do, which is finish between 8 and 11.
Yeah, right. That's it.
Those are the only teams that I can like reasonably think. I guess so. The one I thought about that's just not being discussed. Would you do 1 first-round pick, Russ, into San Antonio's cap space for Josh Richardson? Russ a first for Josh Richardson. And if you're the Spurs, like maybe the Lakers are throwing you a swap in 28. But I wouldn't give up 2 first-round picks because you're getting 1 player, but if you're the Lakers who run themselves like a mom and pop shop, you're saving a boatload of money for this season by going from Russ to Jay Rich.
I think that's a hard sell to like LeBron and Anthony Davis. Like I think if Russ is going, they got to get some, like Richardson's would start, right? but I don't know. That's, well, the Spurs should be talked about just generally more for any of these deals, like, because they can be the dumping ground.
What about Doug McDermott, Josh Richardson for Russ in a first?
I think I'd do that. Just give me some shooting. The shooting is a big factor.
I think the Lakers could argue they'd prefer to not get McDermott so that they have the money off their books next year, but I would do the one first. And if I'm the Spurs, it's like, I'm waiving Russ immediately. Right. I don't have to get involved at the trade deadline with anyone. I got rid of my cap space, and we're all in on Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson. Yeah. I kind of like that for both sides, but there will be people on Lakers circles that will be mad if they give up a first round pick for Josh Richardson.
I get it.
LeBron might be one of them, to be honest, but
well, yeah, that's true too. It's not good. The Lakers are in trouble.
I went to a C- though. You gave them a D+. The next team up they're like kind of an interesting team, even though technically they didn't do anything splashy. Let's get them up on the screen. The Phoenix Suns. Their notable moves include they re-signed DeAndre Ayton to a 4-year, $133 million deal by way of matching Indy's offer sheet. No trade bonuses. No player option at the end of this deal. Just a good piece of business for Phoenix, I guess. Signed Devin Booker to a 4-year, $224.2 million extension, 10% trade kicker, no player options. And believe it or not, this deal will take Devin Booker through his age 30 season. That dude is so young. Signed Monty Williams to a multi-year contract extension, not a contraction, which it says on the screen. Signed Damian Lee to a 1-year vet minimum. Signed Josh Okogie to a 1-year vet minimum. Signed Ish Wainwright to a 2-way deal. Signed Dwayne Washington Jr. to a 2-way deal. It's funny because the Pacers waived Dwayne Washington Jr. so that they could make room for the DeAndre Ayton offer sheet. And then he ends up signing in Phoenix after DeAndre Ayton does. And they acquired Jock Landale from the Hawks for cash. Notable exits: JaVale McGee signed with the Mavs, Frank Kaminsky signed with the Hawks, Aaron Holiday signed with the Hawks, and Elfrid Payton, this is the biggest one, he remains unsigned. Very quickly, I feel like we've had a lot of instances where when I've looked at the notable exits, it's been this team lost 2 players who signed with the same team. Like,
interesting.
So just at least in this podcast, like, so the Lakers with the Kings. So that type of stuff. But anyway, what grade did you give the Phoenix Suns? This is actually the one I've been dying to know about. The next 2 teams, actually, I find to have had the most fascinating offseason. So I'm dying to know what you gave the Suns.
So this was a C in July because the Ayton stuff hadn't happened yet. And I moved it up all the way to a B+. And I don't know if the Booker thing, I don't think the Booker extension was factored in. Start with the Booker, like the Booker extension he's worth that money. The Suns basically get him for the rest of his early prime, and he's locked in. There's no options. Like, this is set. Your superstar foundation is set. I think we agree that Booker is at that level. So that's great. And then the way that the Ayton thing played out, look, this is the type of thing that could just have ripple effects, and he could be unhappy all year, and that could, throw a legit contender off course. But theoretically, he felt the same way last year. And the only difference now is he has $133 million. Like, so if that's
the type of gaming system setup he could buy with that money.
Man, think of the ergonomic chairs. And, spare no expense. Can you get like an Eames gaming chair? Literally those like, $5,000 chair. So teams don't really do this that often. And this was an interesting circumstance because we're talking about a number 1 overall pick that's playing for a contender that is still on his rookie deal, essentially, when all this was happening. I kind of like how the Suns did it. They basically said, like, go out and prove that there's a market at a certain level for you. Maybe they weren't even communicating. They probably didn't say this to him, but the implication was, go prove what you're worth, and then we'll decide if we want to do that. And like immediately they decided, yeah, that's fine. And it's just asset preservation. Whether they view Ayton as a key piece down the road or not, it's clear that there is a market for him at this rate. And that was with a small number of teams able to bid. So you have to assume that with more teams been able to pay him the max, their 4-year maxes, there would have been way more opportunity. So like, this is what he's worth. So you can trade him at this number, I think, for value, most likely. Like you can get back value. You're not attaching anything to get off DeAndre Ayton's money. So I just like the hard line. I like that they didn't do anything earlier than they had to. I like that they said, we'll just pay what we think you're worth, and you go decide, you let the market decide what that is. So it's like the roster didn't meaningfully change, but just the way that the Suns sort of conducted things, I think they went about it the right way. And if the downside is you pissed off Ayton, I think he was already upset, and like that's fine. You can trade him after the restriction expires.
Very quickly, I forgot to include that they re-signed Bismack Biyombo too, which to a 1-year vet minimum. Did not write it. That actually matters because you let JaVale McGee walk. I'm with everything you said. So I flirted with giving them an A- and went with a B+. Look, the Devin Booker extension is no player option.
Yeah.
Like, how is that? That is such a huge win for them. I think it's also, I didn't factor this in, but it's a win that Kevin Durant wanted to come and play with Devin Booker. First Chris Paul, now Kevin Durant. And I know people have been like, well, think about everyone who says like they've won a hooped with all these guys who can score. And I'm like, saying you want like Jamal Crawford as a caps lock hooper is different from being like, I want to go play with Devin Booker.
Yeah.
So that's a win for them, even if they don't end up with KD. I just like, why not just offer DeAndre Ayton a sub-max 5-year deal at the start of free agency? And I like to leave it to chance just felt weird because if you offered this exact contract, like you had to know deep down that there would be a team that was going to give them, especially like when the Pacers were skulking around. And I know at some point you were trying to keep your Kevin Durant trade options open. I understand that, but it just feels like they could have taken a lot. I agree with the way that they played it, but I feel like they still could have played it better because you have to know like the way that free agency works, like this Indiana interest did not come out of nowhere.
No.
And so it's fine that you went out. So this is a very rambly way of me getting to the point of it feels like they treated this Ayton contract as it's going to probably be a net negative for them towards the end, even though the salary cap is going up, even though he's young. I get not wanting to pay a non-superstar center that much money. DeAndre Ayton's a top 10 center in the league. He's like flirting around the like top 5. He might be top 5 already. Like if you're going to tick off the ones that are absolutely better than him, you get into Jokic, you get into Embiid. Karl Anthony Towns is still there. And then after that is like anyone who's guaranteed. I'm sure I'm missing at least somebody. Like some people might say Clint Capella, but it's probably DeAndre Ayton.
You may be underselling it too because sure, but he's young enough, and like I think probably now there's enough smoke for there to be fire with respect to like his professionalism and like work habits and stuff. Like he's an adjustment in those areas away from being even better than we're saying he is. Like they're still like major. He's number 1 overall pick. Like, and he sort of by all accounts is not super serious about basketball. Like that's bad, but like that can change too.
I don't even know if I buy into that as much. This is just like some of the spin that's come out. So, but he was good. And just like the way, and I also think there's like this, it's deserved because to go out in a game 7, like the Suns did was bad. But like they still won like a trillion games. Mm-hmm. And so they're a really good team. I think they played this. I think they played this well. I don't think they played it optimally is really what it was with Ayton. Why not offer him a 5-year sub-max? And if he doesn't take it, then you kind of save face there. And if he does, now you have him on like locked up on market value at worst for the life of this contract with the cap going up. And I didn't ding them for this because I don't know who they would have signed, but to not like get they didn't spend the mini MLE, and I don't really have a problem with that, looking at who they might have realistically had a chance at, but they do need like someone different from Campaign as the ball handler, preferably someone bigger who puts more pressure on the rim. That being said, were you getting that with the mini MLE? So I'm at the point where the Suns are at the level where it's like, well, you should just spend it anyway. Like if there's anybody out there who's even kind of sort of worth it. But like they didn't need Bruce Brown, I guess, if you had Torrey Craig, who's back. So I didn't know what to make of that. It was mostly the Ayton stuff for me, but I think I like the extension for Monty Williams as well. And I actually kind of like I know he didn't play with I know he wasn't playing with the Warriors steadily towards season end, but having Damian Lee, I like that as a flyer on like just a wing who can shoot and move off the ball and also hold up defensively. So I think it was a good offseason. Kevin Durant stuff obviously looms over them, but they could have played it better, but not much better, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I'm asking because I don't know the answer. I'm not sure what my opinion. Do you think that the way they played the Ayton situation was at least partially motivated by, well, what if, and maybe the Pacers were just the wrong team for this, but what if there's a sign and trade out there that we're going to lose the opportunity to execute if we do the 5-year submax deal? Like I wonder, because the Turner thing always made sense. There were a bunch of like base year compensation issues with trying to concoct Ayton trades, but the Turner thing actually, as I recall, actually worked. Like his salary would have been, you could have done it. You could have done a sign and trade for the principals being Ayton to the Pacers and Turner coming back. I wonder if the reason they didn't just sign Ayton sooner is because they were thinking like this is a possibility. But I don't know. I mean, does that make any difference to you? Do you think that was a factor?
So you're saying something? So you're saying the Suns didn't sign Ayton because they thought he could be involved in the KD trade, or just a Turner trade?
That instead of him just signing an offer sheet with Indy, they could have worked out a sign and trade.
So the reporting was that Indy wanted to work out a sign and trade because Herb Simon.
Do that? Wouldn't that be better? Don't you think that'd be better
for the Suns?
Yeah, maybe.
It could. I mean, I do think Turner's a defensive upgrade over Ayton. I don't think he's appreciated enough defensively, and he obviously spaces the floor. But what are you going to pay? I guess he'd be cheaper than Ayton moving forward too after this deal.
Yeah.
The rebounding gets worse for you, and you're not going to be like, who's your best rebounder without DeAndre Ayton there? Is it? I guess would it be Miles Turner? And if it's not, that's an issue.
Problem. And as I think about it, I think maybe the idea would have been that what we can potentially get if we have to trade a disgruntled Ayton on this new deal is more valuable than Miles Turner in the last year of his deal and whatever we have to pay him.
And look, maybe it was as simple as they were going to offer Ayton something, but then the Kevin Durant scenario, like they knew that was deteriorating. They knew he'd be on his list. And they were like, well, if we can reroute DeAndre Ayton as part of this, like no one's off the table aside from Booker and Chris Paul and everything that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So that's not even an insult to Ayton. I still just think like, I get why they didn't sign him to the extension last year. And to be fair, like it seemed like there was very much one team that was going to sign him to the max, unless Detroit went after Duran in part because they thought that Ayton and Indy were married to each other. So, as my work phone goes off in the background, spoiler alert, it's not about a Donovan Mitchell trade. But yeah, so I think it was a good quality offseason. I don't think they did anything wrong or missed out on any opportunities. And even if you go through who's the best player who actually signed a mid-level deal this summer, it's either Joe Ingles or Lonnie Walker IV, I think. And so it's like, whatever. So yeah, I don't think they missed out on anything, but the Suns B+ from both of us, I think, or did you give them an A-?
No, it's a B+ for me.
Let's move on to the final team, which was also fascinating, maybe morbidly so. The Sacramento Kings. Let me throw them up on the screen before I go through them. So they signed Mike Brown to a 4-year contract to be their new head coach. They drafted Keegan Murray at number 4. They traded number 37, Jaden Hardy, to Dallas for 2 second-rounders, one in 2024, one in 2028. They traded Kevin Huerter to the Hawks. Now, if you're watching this on the screen, I'll change it live. They acquired. Oh my God, my typo's here. I'm fixing it when no one else is going to see it. They acquired Kevin Huerter from the Hawks for Maurice Harkless, Justin Holiday, and a 2024 first-round pick that is lotto protected in 2024, top 12 protected in 2025, top 10 protected in 2026, then turns into a 2026 second. Trey Lyles picked up his player option. They signed Malik Monk to a 2-year, $19.4 million deal. They signed Shima Moneke to a 2-year, $2.7 million deal. It guarantees on January 10th, second-year non-guaranteed. They signed Matthew Dellavedova to a partially guaranteed 1-year vet minimum contract. They signed Kent Bazemore to a vet minimum contract. They signed Sam Merrill to a 2-year, $3.8 million deal. That guarantees on January 10th, second year is non-guaranteed. They signed KZ Okpala to a 2-year deal. I could not find info on the exact cost. They signed Naemis Keita to a 2-way contract. Notable exits, Damian Jones signed with the Suns. Dante DiVincenzo signed with the Warriors. And Jeremy Lamb and Josh Jackson remain unsigned. Grant, what grade did you give your Sacramento Kings? Don't
saddle me with the Kings. They would want me though, because all they want are things and people that are associated with the Warriors. So I would be very much on their list. This is a C+, and I feel really uncomfortable with it because the only move I definitely like is the Huerter trade. And even that has a lot of risk, although basically if it's a really high pick, the Kings will not surrender it. But the Kings, you could argue, are a team that just should never be trading first round picks under any circumstances. So I like the Herder trade. I think he's really going to help. I love how much secondary playmaking this offense has now between him and Sabonis in support of Fox, because I'm starting to think that De'Aaron Fox might just be like, he's kind of a scorer first, I think. And I think maybe if you can take the ball out of his hands, not because he's a shooter, but get him on the move, get him in advantage situations, like create a Utah Jazz like offense where he gets it with the head of steam. He's just more of a scorer, I think, potentially. So I like the theory behind that. I am uninspired by the Mike Brown hire. I think he's fine. I just think he has not impressed me as a head coach. He's been a great assistant. Like, that's all I feel confident saying about him. And a super good guy. And I think the Warriors' luster really mattered a lot for the Kings because they care about that. So the Keegan Murray pick looked way better in Summer League than I thought. I'm still not ready after just a Summer League session, basically, to say that that was the right pick over Jaden Ivey. I'm always going to want a guard over a forward. And I just still have questions about Murray athletically, defensively, if he's more than like really going to be like a spot shooter. I don't know yet. So it's a C plus basically because of Herder. Monk is fine, but this again, like zooming all the way out, this offense could be very good and this team could be very exciting. This team's defense has been absolutely terrible forever, and they did nothing to address that. So unless you're a top 5 offense in the league, you're not making the playoffs. You're going to get bounced at best in the first round of the play-in, and you're done. So big picture, there's just like such a one-way construction to this team that makes it almost impossible for them to win more than they lose.
I gave them a B- because I feel like Mike Brown is going to at least care about defense, and that's going to help them in the long run with this personnel. And I like that. I agree with you. The long-term vision, it just doesn't feel aimless. They've decided, let's surround Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox with a shit ton of shooting. And there are worse models to go. I'm a bigger believer in Keegan Murray than you. I think the motion shooting is there for him. I still don't know how I feel about him athletically on defense, and they need him to be like good on like him and Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell are like the backbone of their defense at this point. I also think like the Kevin Herter trade I like, but I also don't like it because never mind that you gave up a first round pick. It's protected so long that you've now handcuffed your ability to go out and make other trades because you haven't. And that's part of my issue with what they did this offseason. You did not take a material step forward in either direction. I don't think you got progressively worse. I don't think you got more than incrementally better. And you're still like, who are the teams in this conference that are definitely worse than the Kings this year? And I'll say the Thunder, the Rockets, the Spurs, and I'll say the Jazz just because they don't want to be better than the Kings. That's it. And so you now have to beat out one other team aside from those 4 to make the play-in. And I don't know if the path is as clear there. And this is coming from someone who is like, I'm incredibly high on De'Aaron Fox still. I'd like to see him put it together for more than just like 3/4 of a season. The other thing I think we need to be not like just more cognizant of, the Kings traded Tyrese Halliburton in part because like they were trying to maximize De'Aaron Fox, or they just weren't high on that pairing moving forward. We then wanted them to draft Jaden Ivey, who was more of because Halliburton to me was not an iffy fit alongside De'Aaron Fox.
No, that was the wrong decision. Can we agree? Like that, trading Halliburton, I think, was objectively a mistake, especially for Sabonis.
I do think it was a mistake. But to me, it doesn't. And the fit with Sabonis and Fox was better than I expected offensively. And that, of course, doesn't come into play here. I'm almost saying like I couldn't, even if I thought Jaden Ivey is going to be the better player, I'm honestly not sure. We would have like killed the Kings because they just got rid of Halliburton, who was a cleaner fit next to Fox than Jaden Ivey ever would have been.
So I would have killed them. I wouldn't have killed them because I think picking Ivey would have been the right decision. I think they've just made the wrong decision twice in a row, basically.
That's fair.
So that's how I would look at it. And like, look, maybe Ivey could be a 0. Like, we don't know. Like, they're just, it's too early. Like, but I just thought that like moving Halliburton was wrong, and then not drafting Ivey was wrong. I think I feel really confident about the first one, and I guess we'll see on the second.
Yeah, so I even feel like a B-, maybe it's like too generous, but I think that they didn't do anything nuclear, which is good, to get better. And if you had told me, my original qualm would have been, well, if they did something nuclear to get worse and just start this thing entirely over, that yes, I could give them a higher grade. But at this point, like if you were ever going to do that, Halliburton should have still been on your team. And to me, there still feels like a lack of innovation here, because I do feel like they're so concerned with ending the playoff drought in any sort of context that they would be satisfied with being ninth. And it's like, that doesn't do it for me when you traded someone like Halliburton. And I don't know what other offseason moves they could have made, but I don't think I feel confident in any of their moves panning out in their favor. Like Malik Monk, I think, is just very plug and play here and can fit. Does he maximize this roster in the context of the playoff discussion? No. Again, the Kevin Huerter thing, very good. Can do some secondary stuff off the dribble. Good shooter. That's going to be valuable around Fox and Sabonis, especially if you still planning getting out in transition. There's also just like, why is Rashawn Holmes still on this team? Is his trade value cratered? I know he was dealing with off-court custody battle with his son, and I hope his son is okay. I just like, and he's a good player. Looking at the on-the-court stuff, he's really good. And so you look at it as, oh, well, Rashawn Holmes is your backup five. That's great. Why? Like Rashawn Holmes to me is a starting center in the league. So there does still feel like not an aimlessness, but a failure to put together something here. But I just like, nothing was detrimental and relative. And there was stuff to like actually like or be like, I'm okay with the Brown signing. I like the vision with Murray. I like that Monk just like can really give you that blast of shooting and just like even some downhill shooting, like not get to the rim, but the stop and pops there. But I'm not high on them to make the playoffs next season, which is why maybe I was too generous, but I ended up at a B-.
No, I mean, we're in the same range. We both gave them an above average grade, right? Like they did better than average. I just, I mean, a lack of a direction, a lack of commitment, a lack of a plan is like nothing new. That's like the defining feature. I feel, I mean, the plan is to like try to finish. It used to be, let's try to finish 8th. And now it's like, it
probably still is like, it's make the plan. I don't even think they can't be. Let's just very quickly, because we have to get out of here. The teams that are better in the West than the Kings, without a shadow of a doubt, the Clippers, the Nuggets.
It's easier to do the worst ones. Do the worst ones.
I'm just saying, but like, I would say there's definitely 6. There's the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Warriors, the Suns. I would probably throw the Timberwolves. They're definitely better than the Kings there at this point.
100%.
My spiciest take might be that the Kings have a better chance of being better than the Mavericks than the Pelicans.
So just to go through, like, so I think depending on what happens with the Lakers, no question, the Thunder, Rockets, and Spurs will be worse than the Kings. And if
I would argue that there is a question about the Thunder because I think that they're the next title team, but please carry on.
You know what? That's actually not crazy. I would say that it is catastrophic if the Kings finish behind any of those 4 teams. Just total disaster.
Unless Utah just decides to trade for Kevin Durant with all the picks they got from the Gobert trade and run it with Mitchell and KD for one season.
And Utah. They're really competing with the Lakers. What, for 10th in the conference? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. And I will say this, Kings fans, who are spectacular, by the way, Kings fans are very self-aware and they remain so passionate about a team that the organization itself, the people in charge, have seldom deserved it. So I love them. They should want these grades to be worse, I think, because I kind of feel like we're sort of allowing them too much of a curve here or too much runway. I hope we're not, but B-, C+, both above average grades. We've wrapped up the offseason grades. This was spectacular. Follow Grant on Twitter at GT_Hughes. The rest of the socials, including mine, are in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Join our Discord. Grant is not lurking, but I am. And the links to that are in the podcast and YouTube description. Please consider subscribing to us in general if you have not already. And if you're just listening to us because it's off season, there's dearth of content. We're the only ones. HardwoodKnocks have been daily during the off season for some reason. Don't ask me why. There's not really a benefit for Grant or I for putting out that much content, but we enjoy it. So give us a follow, subscription, ratings on Spotify and Apple help us a ton. And if you've done all that, word of mouth is a big help too. Tell people about us, retweet our promos on Twitter. Until next time. And as always, Grant and I leave you with an emphatic shout out to the one, the only, the legendary Frank Ntilikina.